Okay, we are recording. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to my presentation about Wisconsin's community college history, its influence on not only itself, but on the community college systems outside of Wisconsin. Let's get started. First, we're going to go over some key historical figures as we briefly overview the history of the Wisconsin community college system. So at the turn of the 20th century, like most states, people did not often seek post-secondary education. They were educated agriculturally at home. Dairy farming state, lots of farming, agriculture, like most places. And the main post-secondary educational institution was the University of Wisconsin in Madison, which is where I'm from. And former President Dr. Charles Van Hise had an idea. He said, "I shall never be content until the beneficent influence of the university reaches every family of the state." Now, what Dr. Van Hise meant by this was that educational systems are not just obligated to teach students, but to also enrich the community that it occupies. This was a really, really big theoretical point that would later be expounded upon in the book by Dr. Charles McCarthy called The Wisconsin Idea, written in 1912. Now, Dr. McCarthy, likewise a political progressive in the vein of Dr. Van Hise, he really took that quote about the beneficence of the university not being bordered by campus. He ran with it and he made it a point. He essentially created an entire political philosophy from it. That wasn't all he did. He was also a public servant. And so what he did was really wanted to broaden Wisconsin's horizon for what attending a post-secondary institution meant. And to facilitate this, he teamed up with a brewer by the name of August Lindeman, because this is in the Wisconsin story without talking about the beer brewing industry. So Mr. Lindeman was a beer brewer who had a problem. He needed to brew more beer and he needed vocationally competent, technically educated people to help him brew beer. So Mr. Lindeman goes to Dr. Charles McCarthy and he says, "Hey, I'm a beer brewer. You're an educational administrator. What can we do here to make more Wisconsinites competent at brewing beer so that I can make some more beer and therefore make some more money?" Mr. Lindeman would lobby the state asking for funds to facilitate a research project led by Dr. McCarthy so that Dr. McCarthy could figure out what would be the best use of public funds in creating a technical college system. And so Dr. McCarthy took this money, ran with it, traveled all over the world, and found that the best fit for a vocational school model was the German model. Now, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, the German model of technical schools was really cutting edge. There was nothing like it in the US. And being a state predominantly of German immigrants, Dr. McCarthy, with Mr. Lindeman's grant money, went to the state and said, "This is a wonderful model. We should have a technical college system just like the Germans do." And thus the Wisconsin Technical College system was born. This system would grow eventually to encompass 26 campuses all across the state, training in technical and vocational education. That is only one half of the Wisconsin community college system. We've also got the expansion of the University of Wisconsin system. Now, UW-Madison is the flagship UW school. It's kind of like IU Bloomington. But campuses would expand. There would be campuses all across the state. Many of them would be two-year institutions. We're going to talk a little bit more about what would happen contemporarily to that system in a little bit. But let's move on to another colorful part of Wisconsin's history, our union history. So in addition to having the first technical college system in the country, yes, Wisconsin Technical College System was the first technical college system in the country, we also had the first legislature in the country guaranteeing public servants their collective bargaining rights. This was the Municipal Employees R Act. I'm not sure what the R stands for right now, but it was signed into law by former Governor Gaylord Nelson, who predominantly in his tenure was a big environmentalist, but he was also very pro-union. And it was through his legislative contributions that the public servants working in the Wisconsin Technical College system, as well as the University of Wisconsin system, these faculty and staff publicly serving to educate people in community colleges were able to collectively bargain. I personally believe this made for great, enthusiastic, well-trained faculty and staff. That's just my opinion. Starkly disagreeing with me would be former Governor Scott Walker. Now, in 2011, Governor Walker passed Act 10, which effectively made MIRA obsolete because it stifled public employees of their collective bargaining rights. Now, union participation in Wisconsin, as it is in many other places, is at an all-time low. And a lot of GOP legislators saw what happened in Wisconsin and said, hey, we can run with this. So in the same way that Wisconsin was one of the first states to offer collective bargaining rights for its public servants, the first state to offer collective bargaining rights for its public servants, it was also one of the first states to take them away and effectively say that unions are now obsolete. By making them obsolete. That aside, what is the current makeup of the public two-year non-tribal community college system in Wisconsin? So as I previously stated, we have the Wisconsin Technical College system. These are technical colleges that are scattered throughout the state of Wisconsin. They are their own separate institutions, but they are all under this umbrella of the Wisconsin Technical College system. Now, how about the University of Wisconsin system? This is a very interesting point. Previous to 2018, these satellite campuses, as they're now known, these smaller stars that orbit these bigger stars, they were their own separate campuses. They were their own institutions. They had their own chancellors. They had their own provosts. They were their own thing. Now, there had been talk for some years prior to 2018 that maybe they should merge the UW colleges and UW extensions together so that these small two-year schools would be under the leadership of the larger universities that they are adjacent to. This was done in order to save money and prevent these two-year colleges from becoming financially insolvent. And so Wisconsin is really interesting in that, for example, if we go over to the Northwest to UW Eau Claire, UW Barron County is not its own separate institution anymore. It's now part of UW Eau Claire. It is a two-year campus under the administration and leadership of UW Eau Claire. So that is how the two-year colleges are now structured in the state of Wisconsin. That was a weird part of our future, or our history, but what does the future hold? So obviously the future of the two-year institutions is going to depend a lot on the future of the UW, because necessarily these institutions are extensions of the UW. I have a picture of Madison here, but honestly, I think that the merger of these two-year institutions to their adjacent four-year institutions is going to give a lot of room for regional personalization, right? So the things that are happening in Eau Claire are going to be really influential things that happen in Barron County and so on throughout the state. Madison, I think, is going to remain its own thing. We also have the prospect of Biden offering free community college tuition to all people. What's that going to look like? Does that mean that Pell is going to be no longer applicable? Are we going to have just bigger refunds, which means effectively more help for non-traditional students, student parents? working students and that sort of thing. And finally, will the unions come back? I hate to end on this note, but I think that the actions taken by former Governor Walker in 2011 and throughout the rest of his administration mean that the unions are not going to be as strong as they were. I regret what this means for faculty and staff in the state of Wisconsin. I regret what it means for their wages. I regret what it means for their benefits. I regret what it means for talent acquisition. I think that what happened in 2011 was probably one of the worst things to happen to the educational system in the state of Wisconsin, if not the worst thing in its history. And it upsets me tremendously, even now, 10 years later, to know that so much damage has been done to the educational system in the state of Wisconsin. It has a brilliant history. It is so innovative. Like, Dr. Charles McCarthy brought the German model to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin exported it to the rest of the country. But we decided to pick a governor who wanted to bully union leaders for 8 years straight. So I guess that's what's gonna happen. Anyway, here's a really pretty picture of some large beer cans in Wisconsin. Thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you found it riveting. On Wisconsin.